To 3 is GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christie's. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Good evening, it's Friday 6 p.m, that means it's time for Dewbs & Co. I am, of course, not Michelle this evening. You've got me, Emily Carver, with you until 7 p.m. Michelle is taking a well-earned evening off after last night's rip-roar of a show that was live from Kent. If you missed it, definitely catch up on YouTube, or why not score yourself an invite to her next one. The word around here that's going around the office is that she's going to be doing more live shows around the country, so definitely look out for those. Well, what a few days it's been. We've seen Liz Truss unceremoniously booted out of number 10 before she'd even had time to unpack her luggage. It actually took longer to elect her than it took for her to leave office, didn't it? And now we're back at square one, with a new Prime Minister set to be decided by this time next week. I do wonder why they didn't just get the last one over in a week too. So, who have you got your money on? Could it be Rishi, the former Chancellor? Is he a safe pair of hands? Or is he part of the problem? Maybe you're ready for Boris to make a comeback. Is he the only one with a true mandate from the people? I think my panel will disagree on that one. Or does he just have far too much baggage for you? Perhaps you think it's time up for the Tories completely, and the only democratic option is now to go to the public for a general election. Let me know what you think. And depending on who you listen to, our country is now apparently the laughing stock of the world. But are we? I'm sick of people always calling us the laughing stock of the world. It's hardly looking rosy elsewhere, is it? And lastly, away from all the political carnage, Prince Harry praises the part therapy has played in his life. So should more men take it up? Have you gone to therapy? Has it improved your life? Should we return to the British stiff upper lip, perhaps? I can see both sides on that one. So there we go. That's what we'll be discussing for the next hour on Dewbs & Co. But first, let's go straight to the headlines.
Emily, thank you. Good evening to you. Well, Penny Mordaunt has declared she's running to replace Liz Truss as the Conservative Party leader and new Prime Minister. The Commons leader made the announcement on Twitter saying she'll unite the country, deliver on her party's pledges and win the next general election. Mordaunt has the backing from former Cabinet Minister Andrea Leadsom. Well, the former Chancellor Sajid Javid has announced on Twitter his support for Rishi Sunak in the leadership contest. Mr Javid says it's abundantly clear that Rishi Sunak has what it takes to match the challenges we face. And the Defence Secretary Ben Wallace has ruled himself out of the Tory leadership race as speculation grows over whether or not Boris Johnson will make a comeback. The Business Secretary, Jacob Rees-Mogg, is the first Cabinet Minister to back Boris. Levelling Up Secretary Simon Clarke has followed suit. Those vying for the Tory party leadership top spot will have to secure 100 nominations from the party's 357 MPs. Well, Ben Wallace hinted at who he's backing.
At the moment, I would lean towards Boris Johnson. I think he will still have some questions to answer around, obviously, that investigation. But I know when I was Secretary of State for Defence, he invested in defence, he supported me, he supported the actions this country has taken to keep us safe. So that's at the moment, I'm leaning towards that. But I think, there are a few days to go and we'll see what's happened. There's some, other candidates who are just as excellent putting their name in the ring. But I think fundamentally we have to answer those first 2 points I said earlier.
Meanwhile, the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, is warning against a revolving door of chaos under a Conservative government.
The risk is not a general election. The risk is continuing with this chaos. What you've seen in the last few weeks is real damage to our economy, real damage to our reputation as a country, and people are paying the price for that, whether it's in mortgages or other things. So the risk is not changing, and there's an alternative. You can either have more of this chaos under the Conservatives or stability under a Labour government.
Well, in Boris Johnson's constituency, there are mixed views on whether or not he should return to number 10.
I think he was good. He got us through quite a lot. And then they seemed to kick him out, and we thought it was terrible.
Yeah, I think he should bring back Boris because people stabbed him in the back.
Undecided at the moment because he made quite a mess of it the last time.
Well, I think we haven't got much of a choice. We haven't got a lot of people we can choose from.
No, definitely no Bojo. Rishi Sunak, that's our favourite choice.
Meanwhile, the Labour MP Christian Matheson has had to resign from the party following allegations of serious sexual misconduct. That comes after the Labour Party suspended his whip and asked him to stand down. An independent parliamentary panel had recommended he was suspended from the Commons after the Commissioner for Standards upheld 2 allegations against him by a former member of staff. Now, in news away from politics, human remains found in a loft at a property in Milton, Keynes have been confirmed as those of Leah Croucher. The 19-year-old disappeared while walking to work in February 2019. Police began searching a house after a tip-off from a member of the public last Monday. The murder suspect, Neil Maxwell, who's a wanted sex offender, took his own life 2 months after the teenager disappeared. The pound has been sliding against the US dollar today as government debt continues to climb. The Chancellor has promised to do whatever's necessary to fix finances after borrowing rose to £20 billion last month. Jeremy Hunt says he wants to ensure taxpayers' money is well spent following a spike in debt interest due to inflation. Ukraine's energy minister says between 30 and 40% of the country's overall power infrastructure has now been damaged. That comes after US intelligence suggested Iran is training Russians in occupied Crimea, teaching them how to use drones. Both countries deny the claims. But on Monday, military drones were used to launch an attack on the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv. Ukraine claims they were deployed by Russia. In the United States, Donald Trump's former advisor, Steve Bannon, has been sentenced to 4 months in prison and fined more than £5,800 for contempt of Congress. The right-wing strategist is refusing to cooperate with lawmakers investigating the riots at the US Capitol building by a pro-Trump mob last year. And lastly, a £1 million fundraiser leading up to Remembrance Day has had to be cancelled because of train strikes. The Royal British Legion says its charity event isn't now going to go ahead as planned on the 3rd of November due to industrial action by the RMT. Up to 2,000 personnel, veterans and volunteers had all been lined up to help sell poppies across London. You are up to date on TV, online and on DAB+ radio. You're with GB News, the People's Channel, where now Emily Carver sits in on Dewbs & Co.
Yes, welcome to Dewbs & Co. with me, Emily Carver. With me until 7, my panel. I've got former Brexit Party MEP Ben Habib and Mary-Ann Ahotta, who is an anthropologist and a filmmaker. I think they are regulars on this panel. I had Ben Habib the last and first time I covered for Michelle Dewberry. Now, I want to know your thoughts throughout the show. Please do get in touch with me at gbviews at gbnews.uk. We'll be reading out lots of your thoughts later in the show. Please do keep them coming. You can also get in touch on Twitter at gbnews or at Carver Emily. Now, have you ever broken up with someone and regretted it? Well, maybe you feel like some members of the Conservative Party right now. Because yes, after just 6 weeks off, the great glowing orb is once again creeping over the horizon. It's not the October sun, it's Boris Johnson. With Liz Truss out, the speculation is mounting that Britain's political Houdini could be ready to pull off yet another trick and return as leader of the Conservative Party. Mary-Ann, is there a spring in your step at the thought of Boris Johnson returning as Britain's Prime Minister?
No, it feels like pantomime season has come early, frankly. This whole idea that someone who is currently under parliamentary investigation may be suspended and expected to stand down as a member of parliament, let alone the Prime Minister. Someone who was found guilty by the police, or not found guilty, people will pull me up on that, found to have broken his own laws and fined by the police. Someone who spent years of his premiership mired in sleaze. He is not the person to sort out this mess. He is not the person to unite the Conservative Party, and he's certainly not the person to unite the country. And fundamentally, that is what we need. And Boris Johnson cannot deliver that mandate.
Well, there's one view, loud and clear. Ben?
Well, I don't disagree, actually. I mean, I think that if you look at the two candidates who are, I think, going to be Rishi versus Boris, you can't really put a paper between them, with one exception, which is that Boris still has an investigation hanging over him. Even Rishi was found to have broken lockdown laws, so he's got a fixed penalty notice. They both presided over an explosion in national debt. They both presided over tax rates at a post-war high.
Well, only one of them was the Prime Minister, to be fair.
Well, no, but they were a team. One was the CEO and one was the finance director.
Well, this is the thing. Now, if you believe what you read in the papers, Boris Johnson, that's what he wants. He wants a return to the dream ticket of Boris Johnson himself as Prime Minister and Rishi Sunak as his right-hand man in number 11. But I can't imagine Rishi Sunak would be pleased with that.
No, and that's the point, Emily. The story here really isn't whether it's Boris up against Rishi, though that looks like it's going to be the case. The story here is that they have a 76-seat majority, but it is not a working majority. The Conservative Party is riven with division. As we heard on the news, Sajid Javid, Dominic Raab, a whole load of people who are in Boris's cabinet are backing Rishi. And Boris does hold grudges. We know that from the way that he chose people before. There is no way these two camps are going to get on harmoniously. What we're seeing is an implosion of a fantastic majority that Boris got at the last election, but they simply letting their egos get in the way, behaving like a rabble, putting self-interest ahead of the national interest.
Yeah, yes.
And the polling does reflect that. But Mary-Ann, may I just put this point to you? Mm-hmm. Is it not more democratic for Boris Johnson to take back the Prime Ministership of this country, seeing as he is the only one in the whole of the Conservative Party who does have a mandate from the public?
Well, no, frankly. If we're going to talk about the most democratic outcome, then we should immediately move to a general election. And fundamentally, the way that general elections work in the UK is that you're not voting for the Prime Minister, you're voting for your MP.
Yes, but I think Boris Johnson may well have been an exception to that rule. I think people very much...
exceptions.
He managed to get a coalition of voters that the Conservative Party had never had before, did he not, Ben?
He did. I mean, he broke, he's a bit like, is it Carlsberg or Heineken that reaches the parts that other beers can't reach? He did. He got to people. He garnered votes. He took seats that had hitherto been Labour seats for 100 years.
But Ben, I think you and I would agree that it's because he's charismatic, but he's narcissistic.
Yeah.
He's arrogant. He's utterly incapable of leading. He's not got any interest in the details, and it's all about boring, detailed government now that will get us anywhere close to getting out of this mess.
To be fair to Boris Johnson, he inherited a pretty difficult hand. He may well have played it badly, but I mean, Brexit, getting that over the line.
Well,
then, of course, having a global pandemic, he barely had time to, you know, even think of the manifesto he was elected upon.
He had a lot of time during the pandemic. You know, we were locked down. What was he so busy doing? World trade flows had dried up. Government business was at a fraction of what it would have been if we'd been in full swing as a fully independent trading nation. He had lots of time to plan. He had lots of time.
Oh, come on! He was doing press conferences practically every night with a death counter, and he was doing the vaccine rollout. Surely, Ben.
Well, he was warning us about all the dangers of the vaccine, and then merrily going off and having a drink with his mates. No, I mean, Boris had ample time to prepare the country for a proper Brexit, like bringing Northern Ireland back into the United Kingdom, cutting regulations, getting ready to cut regulations so that we can deviate for the benefit of our national interest, cutting taxes, because, yes, that is a good thing to do if you want to boost growth. He had all the time in the world to plan that. He didn't plan any of it. In fact, we then opened up without any vision for how we were going to cope with broken supply chains, broken storage facilities for gas, an inability to pump oil at the speed that we would need in order to get the economy back on its feet again. And we've got this supply-side inflation problem. We've got massive national debt, huge taxes, huge inflation, and it's because of Rishi and Boris.
Well, there you go. There's Ben, there's your damning response to Boris Johnson becoming our next Prime Minister once again. Now, I'm going to come to you, Marianne, after we go to our polling that GB News has been busy doing. We've been busy polling members of the Conservative Party on how they feel about each candidate, and the results are in. Boris Johnson is indeed at the top with 38% of the support. That's almost twice as much as his nearest rival, Rishi Sunak, who has 20%. Penny Mordaunt was the third favourite candidate. She got 8% support in our poll. And fourth was Ben Wallace, who has in fact already written himself out of the contest and says he's favouring none other than Boris Johnson. I mean, when you look at the public, Rishi Sunak is the forerunner.
I mean, you're choosing between a donkey and an ass, aren't you? And which is why I would suggest that we should have a general election, and then the Conservative Party can sort out their leadership fiasco and put it to the British public. Fundamentally, I think the GB News viewers are quite patriotic. They care about Britain.
Yes.
And I think what is important when they're thinking about and all of us, in fact, when we're thinking about what should happen here, is that fundamentally we deserve better. We deserve better than this.
We won't get it with Starmer. We won't get better with Starmer. I'm holding my head in my hands and utterly devastated that Liz Truss, who had a really good policy agenda, who was defenestrated by the Tory wets in her party, by the Treasury and by the Bank of England, wasn't allowed to actually get on and deliver the promises she made during the leadership contest.
She made pie-in-the-sky promises.
They were not pie-in-the-sky. They were not pie-in-the-sky.
Black hole and no independent
explain
analysis.
The 65. Tell me what the 65 billion...
Well, that's what the Office for Budget Responsibility came out and said.
No, that's not the black hole.
Based on the forecast,
you're mixing it up, Marianne. The 65 billion
worth of unfunded tax cuts
that
there
wasn't.
She and Kwasi
It was 45 billion that they were claiming was unfunded.
They were claiming, and then the results actually came in.
Let Ben finish his rebuttal.
The fact is, if you want to grow an economy, you do not do it by funded tax cuts. That is just robbing Peter to pay Paul. The way you grow an economy is to boost productivity, and you boost it by reducing taxes on business and on individuals. You boost it so you allow trade to flourish. That's how you do it.
But Ben, do you also boost it by not capping bankers' bonuses? Do you also boost it by removing the 45% tax rate?
Anyway, the 45% tax rate, let me just tell you something about the 45% tax rate. It may be a politically charged subject, but those 1.7% people in this country who pay 45% tax rate pay 36% of the total income tax take that the government gets. We need more rich people in the United Kingdom. You don't attract them to the United Kingdom and hold them here, and you don't attract bright young bankers from New York and from Japan to London if you do not compete.
The problem is, Ben, that narrative the public didn't buy into it, and that was the issue. Liz Truss had there may be many merits to her policy agenda.
Why didn't the public buy into that?
Well, because she attempted to make the case very poorly.
She was brought down by the Treasury.
No, hang on a minute.
She was brought down by the Bank of England.
She was unable to make the case to her party and the country. Marianne?
I absolutely agree. I mean, all you need to listen to is the excruciating local news radio interviews that she did for the network of BBC channels, and it is you chew your knuckles. Fundamentally, I care a little bit less about the banker who is wondering about how massive his or her bonus is going to be.
Let Marianne finish.
What I care about are the people who are queuing up at food banks this evening in order to feed their children, who are worried about whether they can get their small business through the winter.
They're not mutually exclusive issues.
It is not trickle-down economics.
It's not about trickle-down economics. It's not about trickle-down economics.
Myth that
it's about... I'm not advocating trickle-down economics. I'm advocating growth in the economy. What you've got now is a choice between either Rishi and Boris, and then what you'd like is Starmer. With Rishi and Boris, you're going to get high borrowing, high taxation, low growth. With Starmer, you'll get even high borrowing, even higher taxes, and even slower growth.
Well, that's true, isn't it, Mary? You need to grow the pie in order that everyone gets a bigger slice of the pie, regardless, right?
Absolutely.
So that's what she was trying to do, and she obviously articulated it painfully badly, which led to her ultimate demise.
I think when you're in a situation where a country is facing recession, where the global situation, the outlook is challenging, to say the least, doing a kind of da-da magic trick, rabbit out of a hat that terrifies the markets, that makes people panic about their pensions, about their mortgages, about the cost of borrowing, that is not the way to cement confidence. That is not the way to stabilise the economy.
No, the only thing I worry...
Fundamentally, I agree that growth is essential, but that was not the way to achieve it.
The only thing I worry about, well, not the only thing, but one of the things I worry about is it seems that somehow our country is ungovernable in terms of can new political movements, can changes, radical changes actually ever happen in this country without us being brought back to the status quo, kicking and screaming? Who knows?
Well, you're quite right. You're quite right. And Marianne is completely hijacked by the orthodoxy. Completely.
Hijacked by the orthodoxy. Anyway, we have to go. We have to go back. We've got more polling, I believe. Perhaps it doesn't matter which of the candidates win because our other polling shows Labour's lead over the Conservatives is only getting bigger. Labour is now 39 points ahead with 53% of the vote. That must be an absolute wipeout if that came to pass. The Conservatives are languishing on just 14%, a new record low for them in modern British history. Well, there you go, Ben.
It's not good.
Absolute wipeout territory.
It's not good, and we do need a new political force, a political force that is optimistic, that isn't obsessed with balancing spreadsheets and understands that a deregulated, low-tax economy is one that will benefit everyone, will attract greater wealth into the country, so people don't have to go to food banks.
No.
That's the point.
Right, well, let's have a look at what people are saying to us. So Adrian says there needs to be an election. It's not fair putting someone else in as Prime Minister. If Boris stands, it should only be in an election not put in by MPs or he will get a roasting again. Sunak or the others wouldn't win an election for the Tories. They agree with you, Marianne, that it's time for a general election. Peter says, I was told at a very young age, life isn't fair, deal with it. I am 66 years old and it is great advice. Deal with it. Presumably that's about economics, inequality in our country, so on. Essentially,
who's dealing with
life is tough. We need to crack on, a bit of personal responsibility. I mean, sure, there's some merit to that. Paul says, do we really want Carrie Johnson back in charge of the country? I do remember when Boris was in power, all of the net zero stuff, some of the wokery that people complained about with the Boris Johnson administration, that was put down to Carrie. I don't know how much truth there was to that. Perhaps there was a little bit of sexism in that. What do you think? Do you think Carrie was pulling the levers behind number 10?
I think it's misogyny, pure and simple, the idea that it's under the thumb. But I do have to pull you up on the net zero stuff. The net zero stuff is what will actually secure a sustainable, ethical, survivable future for us.
Well, there you go. 1 point for Boris Johnson. He wanted to get to net zero quicker and faster.
It's a Conservative Party manifesto pledge. You should be voting Tory. Net zero is a disaster the way we're practising it. What we've done, Marianne, is turn our back on fossil fuels without being ready to power our industry without them. We can't do the path to net zero that Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak took us down. And if Labour get in, they'll be even worse. What we need is to pump more gas, ensure that we've got access to independent fuel from Russia and from other sources, and at the same time build nuclear power stations and get energy independence.
Now, we've been focusing on Boris Johnson mostly here, but of course Penny Mordaunt is also in the running. She's declared that she would like to be Prime Minister too. Does she float your boat a little more? She's patriotic, she cares about this country, it seems. She's got fabulous hair, she's clearly competent. A little bit, although I remember in the previous leadership election, people pointed out that perhaps she wasn't as competent as she liked to present. What do you make of her?
I mean, on the fabulous hair front, I think Rishi Sunak wins that particular.
Oh, really?
He's got very nice hair.
I've never noticed his hair.
He's got good hair.
He has Brill cream. Does he use Brill cream? Do you remember what Brill cream is?
No, but he always looks like neat and put together.
It is very. He's very.
Well, he's got enough money to.
Yeah, that's right.
He's got enough money to probably get a hair transplant if he ever lost any. Penny?
I guess Penny Mordaunt is the fresh start, perhaps. I mean, at least, as Ben pointed out, the Boris Johnson-Rishi Sunak game, to some extent, we kind of know what that is. That's kind of business as usual, excluding the Trussonomics, interim, the kind of the sideshow warm-up act of chaos. So maybe Penny Mordaunt is the person, as she said in her tweet announcing that she was running, the person.
She did it about 20 minutes after Liz Truss left, did she not? But of course there was lots of controversy among Conservative Party members about her comments about the whole trans debate, about what is a woman, are trans women women, and all sorts, which of course completely divides the party, or at least most of the party believe that's a load of rubbish. But she's not without her own controversies. Although she did step up in that urgent question where she sort of auditioned for the role of Prime Minister, did she not, in the House of Commons earlier this week?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think Miriam makes a good point, though. She is not tainted by the last few years of government. She's been kept out of it by Boris Johnson. And even though she finds it difficult identifying what a woman is, I mean, perhaps it is time to give a brand new face a go. I think Boris Johnson is a highly dangerous choice for the Conservative Party because he's still got this parliamentary standards inquiry going on.
Yes, that is true.
He still has to face that. And Rishi Sunak, if he gets the leadership, he too will be accused of having broken lockdown laws. He won't escape it.
Yes, also I must say, and there's always the question about his wife being this billionaire, which people don't like too, Marianne.
I mean, again, that's a red herring.
I agree. I agree with you on that. It's a red herring. Yeah.
The ink is still wet on those 57 resignation letters from Boris Johnson's own cabinet. 57 ministers resigned. Prior to that, not even a month before, 148 of his MPs voted in a no-confidence vote. We can't forget that.
Yes, and a handful have already said
he was terrible.
A handful have already come out on the media and said that they will give up the whip, essentially stand down if he becomes Prime Minister again because of that ongoing parliamentary inquiry and also because of all the scandals and the lies and all sorts that are that are just minor issues maybe for some people, but for others it's existential. Anyway, we have to move on. Coming up, from ruling the waves to waving bye-bye to our international reputation, is the political chaos in Westminster damaging Britain around the world? I think it's overstated, but let's see what you think.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, We're
on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back to Dewbs & Co. with me until 7. My panel got a little bit heated in the first part of the show, of course, discussing whether Boris should come back or if we have any other options, or whether we should go to a general election. There's lots of things to talk about, discuss, disagree on. I've got former Brexit Party MEP Ben Habib, of course, and Marianne Hotter, who's an anthropologist and a filmmaker. So you've been sending in all your opinions on the last one. In terms, we're going to be looking at whether Britain is actually a laughingstock across the world. But going back to whether Boris should make a comeback, Jenny says the people will vote for Boris. She says that in capital letters, so she's clearly a Boris fan. Perhaps he will. I mean, if he gets 100 nominations, the party membership will probably put him into the job. But then will the same thing happen again? Will ministers resign? Will he lose control of the party? That's the worry. He'll just pick up where he left off. Nothing will have changed. Ruby says, I think this is referring to what Marianne said, calling Boris Johnson narcissistic and arrogant has nothing to do with the debate. It's about who has the experience to run our country. Yeah, Marianne, don't call him a narcissist.
Rishi Sunak has that experience. He's been the Chancellor.
That is true. Although, is it different to be Prime Minister? I imagine it is, although Jeremy Hunt would know how to do both jobs at the same time, at least for a week, anyway. Nigel, would you let a burglar work in a bank? No. Johnson broke his own laws. He can't sit in the seat where laws are made. Again, that just shows how we will return to the same debates, the same discussions. Boris Johnson won't forget about it. Anyway, we're going to move on. We're going to go international. Now, Liz Truss probably didn't expect her face to be splashed across every newspaper in Europe quite so soon, and sadly for all the wrong reasons. But British politics has become a subject of intense interest and some mockery across the continent. Ben, has Truss really turned us into a bit of a laughingstock?
I don't think Truss has. I think the Conservative Party has. And but I think we've got to be careful about looking at ourselves through international eyes and somehow, trying to change course because of what other countries think of us. What we have to do and what our elected politicians have to do is to set a path which is suitable for British interests, for British people. That's what we've got to focus on. And yes, to some extent, that does require international recognition, a belief that the United Kingdom is a trustworthy ally, partner, trade partner, and that we can buy their government bonds, for example. These are fairly fundamental things.
We don't break international law, for example.
Well, let's just talk about international law. Every major Western economy breaks international law habitually, including, no doubt, your darling, the EU. They do it all the time. If the law doesn't suit them, they break it. The problem we have in the United Kingdom, and particularly in our House of Lords, is that we wish to beat ourselves over the back whenever we want to do anything that suits the British interest that may go against this kind of globalist, European Union-led, World Economic Forum-led, what they regard as international law. So, for example, we haven't got the courage. So, for example, we haven't got the courage. We haven't got the courage to take Northern Ireland back into the United Kingdom because the Lords are more worried about what the EU think of us than they are about the 1.8 1.8 million British citizens who live in Northern Ireland.
I must say that some of the headlines coming from Europe do seem a bit gloating. They do seem to be full of glee at our troubles over here, and I must say that might have a little tiny thing to do with Brexit. You know, Germany, the Frankfurter Rundschau, which is one of their newspapers, said the chaos in Britain has reached perfection. Belgium says, is there anyone capable of leading divided Britons out of this pit? You know, Marion von Rentergem, a respected television and press commentator in France, said the UK's gone completely mad and become an incredible mess. Then I have a look at what's going on in those countries, and I see that inflation is also through the roof. We see in France that strikes are ongoing. We see that EDF is suing its own government for billions. It's hardly all rosy over on the continent either, is it?
There are certainly global challenges, and all those countries are struggling, but none of them have had a prime minister who quit after 44 days. I mean, a friend of mine messaged to say, oh, it's only 1.5 trusses till Christmas.
But we've had no violence on the streets. And the French have habitual, habitual violence on the streets. They smashed up the Champs-Élysées repeatedly, the yellow vests or whatever they were called. That went on for ages. When they want to come into our waters illegally to take our fish, they just come and do it. They threaten to cut our legal entitlement to electricity supply. They'll do anything, the French, to get their way.
Hang on.
All this chest beating about how the EU might view us and how our trading partners might view us because we've had a little political difficulty, I think, is missing the point.
But over here, we've got, you know, men and women gluing themselves to roads. So
I know, which is
we've got our own chaos.
We're going to have a winter of extraordinary discontent with teachers striking, with nurses striking, rightly so, and I support them because it is untenable the way that they are expected to work in conditions that are unsustainable in hospitals and workplaces with expected standards that just don't meet safety concerns, that are going to fail patients, all the rest of it. It is all brewing, and it's because of years and years and years of underfunding, of poor policy decision-making, of not really thought-through laws, and because of the cost of Brexit. Now, I am not someone who wants to revert...
It's got nothing to do with Brexit.
That's not true,
it's got nothing to do with Brexit. It's 12...
Let Marianne finish her pitch.
Fundamentally, the reason that, Emily, you point out that there are nations, particularly in Europe, who are potentially gloating, is because we divorced our biggest trading partner, and they said... oh, are you sure that's a good idea? And we said, yes.
But what I would say is, let's have a look in Italy. I don't think you'd like what's going on there with the far-right coalition.
Their debt levels, their economies, their debt levels are much higher than ours. Their economies
are
in
much... the bottom.
No,
let's not race Italy to the bottom.
You're somehow blaming Brexit for our plight. What we've got here, what we haven't discussed, and what's been missed from this discussion, is the real cause of the problem, which is lockdowns, a breaking of supply chains, having no vision for how we unlock, having rampant inflation as a result of lockdowns, and if anyone supported lockdowns, they're responsible for the problems we're facing at the moment, followed by, and this is a really important point, a Federal Reserve hiking interest rates, absolutely putting its the metal to the floor to raise interest rates to curb inflation in the States, and it can do it because the US is energy independent. And it is dragging capital out of the world, and that is affecting the UK, Europe, the Far East, the Middle East, the whole world. You look at currencies against the dollar, they're all going down.
That's true, isn't it? We've had, you know, the pandemic and the policy decisions that were made have caused the inflation that we are now experiencing, the quantitative easing that we had, the spending throughout the crisis, people being paid to sit at home. This has all disrupted the global economy, and we're now going to have to pay for it.
The huge global shocks of the pandemic.
Of lockdowns, not the pandemic, of lockdowns.
Pandemic,
of lockdowns.
You say what you...
That's the policy response. The policy response was lockdowns, and that's what caused the broken supply chain.
Millions of people dying have an impact on global policy and economics.
Millions more are going to die now because of lockdowns.
Oh, stop
the waiting list for the NHS has trebled since before lockdowns.
So fundamentally, Emily, I think the response to all those global shocks and threats to stability and prosperity and growth into the future are not to be solved by pulling up the drawbridge and becoming even more of an isolated Atlantic
I don't think
island.
we are not... Hang on. I will not let that pass. We are not an isolated little island.
Are you
For
sure?
1 million visas were given out last year,
Absolutely.
I believe. We are very much a welcoming country. Boris Johnson, he is liberal on immigration just as much nearly as Liz Truss was. I mean, if there's anything that will get Conservative voters back on board is if they were a little tougher, at least on the illegal immigration.
I think I would say let's talk about our really, really robust and exciting international trade agreements that have been secured. Oh, wait, there aren't that many of them.
Well, these things take
There
time.
are over 60 that Liz Truss secured as Foreign Secretary.
Let's talk about
as Trade Secretary.
the impact of that on British growth and productivity. Let's talk about the massive skills shortage and labour shortage that we're facing. Let's talk about the
let's talk about
costs.
Let's talk about another
question. None of those things are going to be resolved by being more isolated.
It's
not isolated.
Hang on. Right, we must move on. This leads me to another question, which is, are we more scathing of our prime ministers and politicians in this country than people are elsewhere? I'm sure many of our viewers don't use Twitter, but if you did, you'd have seen an avalanche of memes lampooning Liz Truss and the Conservative Party. Here's one example. The Airbnb logo over a picture of 10 Downing Street, perfect for short stays. The fake ad says, that's nice. Ben, what do you make of these memes? There's been many, many. Of course, we had the lettuce, which outlasted the Prime Minister's tenure in number 10. Do we have, now you've been a member of the European Parliament.
Yeah.
Do we have a particular irreverence in Britain for our politicians? Are we meaner to them, essentially?
Oh, we absolutely are. I mean, the expression toe the line, you know what that expression means.
Yes.
It's two sword distances away from each other. You know, in the past, you had to separate these people because there was a risk they might draw a sword and plunge it into each other. You know, and that's great. We want division in politics. We want the kind of healthy debate Marianne and I are having right now. What we don't want is the kind of European Parliament form of democracy, which is a fig leaf of a democracy, by the way, where you can't speak unless you've got a speaking slot. You can only speak for 30 seconds if you're asking a question. You get 1 minute allocated speaking time a plenary. You know, all those kind of... What we don't want is that. That is rubbish. What we want is this rough and tumble, because out of the rough and tumble comes ideas, comes vision, and comes a settlement.
But you know what? I'm not sure I agree. I think things are particularly, let's say, heated, divisive, and plain nasty at the moment. It seems that, you know, it's the classic, we can't get along. But I do think this is putting off normal people with a little bit of empathy who aren't completely closed off to it from going into politics. I mean, I look at this, I love politics, I'm fascinated by it. I would love to make a change in this country and do that sort of thing. But I think, Jesus, the abuse you have to put up with.
But who
it's
is
disgusting, isn't it?
Marianne, would you go into politics?
No, because it's disgusting. It disgusts me on one level that if you were to become a female MP, you would probably have to put up with rape and death threats every day. That is just unacceptable. And I think it's wonderful that we have a wet lettuce that lasted longer than Liz Truss and celebrated...
Here's some more, how to lose an economy in 10 days.
Well, there you go, and celebrated with a Greggs sausage roll. I just thought that was a beautiful touch from the Daily Star. Not normally a paper I subscribe to or you know...
It's quite a good one, you know.
But it was very funny. And I thought, they've absolutely got that just absolutely nailed, just the touch. And I think, fundamentally, we do need an outlet. And rather than, you know, punching each other or starting a fight or doing something violent or damaging, much better to laugh about this, but then not let that sublimate all our anger, because we should be angry about this, because it's outrageous and we do deserve better.
But this is also with the conversation today that the media were pushing about the £115,000 allowance that Liz Truss may be entitled to. People arguing that she doesn't deserve it because she was only in the job for 45 days, crashed the economy, blah, 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 blah. In other countries, would they even think twice about a former Prime Minister, President receiving an allowance?
I mean, it is extraordinary that the debate's gone there. When you think about the magnitude of the economic problems we're facing, we're debating whether she gets $115,000 or... I mean, she'll probably in time, or, you know, a lot of them are, booted up to the House of Lords and then they get a stipend and an office and God knows what else, what other perks they get. I mean, is she entitled to $115,000 in perpetuity? Probably not.
Well, it's not exactly that. She does get a kind of severance payment, which I think is 25% of the Prime Minister's income, which is something like 19 grand, for 40-odd days. But probably a lot of, time off her life because, frankly...
I mean, she'll probably spend it on therapy after the last 45 days. I mean, Jesus, it's been a tough run.
But the £115,000 is an allowance in order to pay for costs associated with continuing to live a public life. So if she doesn't do that, if she doesn't sort of get rolled out as a former Prime Minister, then she wouldn't be able to claim those. So it doesn't directly go to her to, to spend on sangria and biscuits.
I must apologise to our viewers at home for saying Jesus too many times. It's a bit rude, and I don't usually actually say it. I don't know how it came into my vocabulary like that. Anyway, now you've been sending in all your opinions. Jay says, I think we're a laughingstock. No government, no borders, no hope. We're a joke, but no one is laughing in the UK. Well, Jay, that's a very depressing take, but that may reflect quite a lot of people watching today, at least their mood. John says the EU countries are in exactly the same mess as we are, and they didn't have a mini budget. So what's their excuse? That's a good point. Every single country is suffering from inflation. Germany, 10.9%, it's Italy 9.5%, inflation in Netherlands 14.5%, Russia 13.7%, Estonia 23.7% in September. So we're all struggling from the consequences of lockdown, quantitative easing and so on and so forth.
But some of ours is self-inflicted harm. That's the point.
Why? Why do you think...
Because we have a Prime Minister who's had to stand down after 40 days.
When you talk about self-inflicted harm, you would have to quantify the extent to which we've been damaged more than all these other nations that Emily's just reeled off.
We have the lowest growth in the G7. We have... increased borrowing. We have the lowest productivity in all the G20.
Our borrowing is much lower than the EU. We are in a much better position.
It is not a competition.
But this is the problem. Because of Liz Truss's failure to communicate what she was doing and why in a reasonable way to the public, now she will unfairly be blamed.
Absolutely
her and Kwasi will unfairly carry the can, as you say, for absolutely everything that's now wrong with the economy. And that is the state of our public discourse. Anyway, after the break, we're going to switch our focus from politics and discuss therapy. Men, do you think you should have more of it? Prince Harry says it helped him. We'll discuss after the break.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens,
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back to Dewbs & Co. with me, Emily Carver. We're with you until 7. My panel, I've got former Brexit Party MEP Ben Habib and Marianne Ohota, who's an anthropologist and filmmaker on my left. Now, you've been sending in your opinions, but I think we're going to go straight to our next and final topic, Prince Harry. He's back in the headlines again. It seems like he's never out of them. This time, he's been quoted giving a talk in California, saying he regained his confidence through therapy. The Prince says mental health support helped him to see the world in a different way. Now, we know a lot of men struggle silently with their mental health. Ben, is therapy the answer?
Well, I want to dissociate, if I may, the subject of mental health from Prince Harry for a second, because I can't. When I put them together, I'm overcome by a desire to tell him to, get a stiff upper lip and get on with life.
But has he got a point?
He may have a point, but he's had an incredibly privileged life, and Meghan and him, all their utterances basically come back to woe is me, and haven't I had a tough time, and the royal family treated me badly, and I had a bad childhood, and we've all had bad childhoods, and you've got to stand on your own 2 feet. I don't want to belittle mental health issues. They're very important. Those people who have a genuine problem, and I can't imagine why Harry would put himself in that bracket, but those people who have a genuine problem obviously need help.
Do you think sometimes we over-egg the mental health issue?
No, I think it's huge. I think 1 in 4 people... Well, it's not that I think... It's a fact. 1 in 4 people will have mental health issues, mental ill health throughout their lives.
Yes.
Everybody has mental health in exactly the same way that we have physical health, and we need to normalise that and make it stand in equal merit, in equal openness and in equal acceptance. And until we do that, people will lose their lives. And what you're saying, Ben, about stiff upper lips, pulling themselves together, what have you got to worry about or what have you got to complain about? That literally costs people their lives, because that means that people don't think that they can speak
Sure,
up.
I was referring to Prince Harry,
but
who needs a bit of...
he is also a person.
He is, but he's an incredibly privileged person.
Doesn't matter.
Who's had an incredibly privileged background, and all the utterances that come from Prince Harry about how he's had a tough time and how Meghan's had a tough time. There isn't anything optimistic that he ever says, how lucky he is to be Prince Harry.
You're saying things that are really harmful, because someone who goes, well, I'm wealthy, so I shouldn't feel this way and I can't speak out because I will be judged. That costs people their lives. 6,000 people a year take their lives in the UK and Republic of Ireland. Thousands more attempt suicide, and that is because people don't get the early intervention and the support that they require.
I do wonder
what... It's not just about therapy, it's about being able to talk to your mate or to your partner or to your family.
I do wonder what people at home think. Do you think that we don't have enough resilience? Do you think that young people in particular don't have enough resilience? Or do you think that men should speak out, should go to therapy, should engage in these conversations, and then they'll be happier, healthier brothers, fathers, sons, friends? Do you think they'll be better people if they have therapy? Or do you think people like Prince Harry are almost glorifying bad mental health or minor mental health
Well, I'm with you, Emily. I think he is glorifying it. I think
it goes both ways, though. Because some people will say,
And
resilience is key. You need to teach people that they need to, essentially pull their socks up, get up there.
Do you say that to someone who's experiencing cancer?
No.
Do you say, oh, you should
But it's
just
not
be
the same
stronger,
thing
you should fight
exactly.
harder. It is. It really is.
I mean,
there are grades of it, aren't there?
No, not really.
It actually all comes back to stripping away self-determination, self-responsibility, people standing on their own 2 feet. And, we've gone from... Tony Blair introduced this sort of nanny state, Boris Johnson upped it to a wet nurse, and now everyone's got a quivering lower lip. And I'm not saying that people haven't got genuine mental health issues with which they need help. But we are becoming a very weak nation.
There will be
as
people
a result
in your life, Ben,
who
are struggling, who may well never tell you until it's too late.
There are people very close...
And that is incredibly
Marianne, there
sad.
are people very, very close to me familiarly who have got mental health issues. But that doesn't mean that we have this quivering lower lip and we cease to make decisions for ourselves and get on with life.
So be kinder. The people who are out there now listening to us have this conversation, which I think is is borderline harmful. Because
why is it borderline? Because you want to control my view of this subject.
Because
but it comes back to that's exactly.
But hang on. Let me just come in here.
We are
I think at the same. I think we can acknowledge. I think.
Just proved my point.
Hang on. I think at the same time we can acknowledge two things at the same time. One, that people have serious mental health problems, and that therapy can help people who are,
which I agree with,
suicidal, suffering from major anxiety, depression, whatever it is, and also talk about whether we need to improve resilience and teach people that they can get through things by, adopting certain practices, be it, ways of overcoming things. Both of those things can be true.
Those developing resilience, feeling healthy and strong and able to address, tackle, overcome the challenges of life. Life is not easy. Life is hard for everybody, whether you're the Prince of England or whether you're someone...
It's less hard for him.
It's hard in different ways for different people. So fundamentally, the essence of resilience, the essence of good mental health comes from people who have poorer mental health, who are worried about their well-being, able to say, I need help, I'm worried about this, I'm struggling. And for us to be able to have healthy conversations with each other about saying, are you OK? Do you want to talk? Not people keeping quiet because they're worried that they're going to be judged for being
and I do think
having a
I do think you can be rich and have all the privileges in the world and also suffer from mental health. Let me just go to a couple of views from people at home. Jackie says, if Harry has had therapy, it clearly doesn't work. I don't know what she's getting out there. Phil says, most men would need therapy if they were married to Meghan. Harsh. John says, we should not confuse mental health with victimhood. We need to raise awareness of mental health issues without labelling a bad mood as a mental health crisis. I think that's fair. Now, up next, you've got Patrick Christie's with Friday Night Feast. Patrick, are you there? What's coming up on your show?
Yes, absolutely stunning show that, Emily. Well done. Yes, so I've got loads. Bring back Boris. What do we reckon? People are going to have a whopping great big debate on that. I went out and asked the nation as well, have you now just forgotten about Partygate? Because if you have, then Boris has got a clean slate. We're also going to be interviewing someone who you might not expect, frankly, to be running for Prime Minister, but he is, and he could actually win. We've got all the usual features. We're also going to be discussing the fact that now the plane company that was supposed to be flying people to Rwanda has pulled out of the deal, so we haven't even got any planes anymore. And I get arrested at sea by the police. Oh, and also it's Dog of the Week.
Wow, there's something to tune into. Sounds like a brilliant start to the weekend for everyone at home. Now, Michelle will be back on Monday. I'd like to say thank you to my lovely panel, Ben Habib and Mary Ann Ahota. But don't go anywhere because, of course, Patrick Christie's is up next. First, we've got to go to the weather.
Evening, I'm Alex Deakin, and this is your latest weather update from the Met Office. The mild weather continues this weekend, as do the showers, although large parts of England and Wales will have a dry day tomorrow. Far from dry out there this evening, thanks to this swirling area of low pressure. Bands of showers are crossing the country, some pretty heavy downpours in places, and those very heavy outbreaks of rain will continue to work their way out across eastern England into the North Sea, but more showers following to North Wales and Northern Ireland this evening, spreading into northern England and southern Scotland during the early hours. It'll stay fairly misty and murky with outbreaks of rain across the northeast, and it stays mild. Temperatures not dropping too far overnight, many staying in double figures. A fine start then to the weekend for a good part of England and Wales. Any early rain across the far north of England clears. A dull, damp start for central southern Scotland and Northern Ireland, but for the east of Northern Ireland and southern Scotland, it should cheer up a little through the afternoon. Some brighter spells across the Highlands and the Western Isles, but a lot of cloud and drizzly rain across the northeast. Sunshine elsewhere further south, lifting the temperatures to 18 or 19, but the sunshine turning hazy and the showers return to southwest England and Wales during Saturday evening. They then spread north and intensify, so widespread showers as we head into the early part of Sunday. This line of showers looking pretty intense. Some very heavy rain on that as it moves its way northwards across England and Wales on Sunday morning, eventually turning up in Northern Ireland and southern and central Scotland for Sunday afternoon. To the south of that, it may well brighten up for a time, but we will see then more showers coming into the southwest. Again, it's mild though, so between those shower bands with a bit of sunshine, 18, 19 Celsius is possible. And the mild thing will continue through much of next week as well. It's often going to be blustery and there'll be further showers to come as well. Enjoy your weekend. Goodbye.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christie's. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Good evening, everybody. It's that time again. Strap yourself in for 2 hours of great chat. The stories that have got you talking, alternative take on this week's news, and plenty of laughs along the way. This, people, is Friday Night Feast. Your weekend starts here. Get yourself a drink, grab a handful of nuts if that's your thing, and sit back and relax. Here's a little taste